about 4:20 in the evening. There's about 13 minutes of light left before technical sunset. The warm weather is disappearing. It's going to test my ability to stand out here. I do not like the cold. It's not truly cold yet, but I think the past couple of days were the last of the warm weather. There's not much of an interesting sky. Today it's much more typical of cold weather. I said this before in a previous warmer weather video, but I think the warmer the weather, the nicer color sky you get. This will probably just be a stream of consciousness video. We'll see how long it will end up being. But one interesting thing to think about is what is maybe the most important sentence in all of language. Could be at the heart of philosophy too. And that is the question, do you want to know why? A lot of people, in American society at least, today, have lost interest in understanding why things happen. There are smart people who follow the rules and essentially keep the society on track. In large part, American society is not interested in understanding how people like judges come to reason about the judgments they make, or thinking about how politicians reach the positions they do. A lot of people have replaced the want to know how things work or why things work the way they do with conspiracy theories. They think that everything that has happened or will happen is part of an obvious conspiracy against an individual or a group. Now, this is clearly not the case if you engage in any deep critical thought. If you engage in critical thought, you can understand the reasoning behind all rulings, or most rulings, and most political positions. However, for people that have become apathetic to knowledge and reasoning, conspiracy theories are essentially what they operate on. When you get to this point, as a member of society, you are effectively useless to that society. Yes, you can still perform your job functions, but to any deeper level, you are useless to that society. You may help it functionally progress if you're a builder of some sort, but the ideas you hold only serve to degrade the society. Now, this may not necessarily be the fault of people who have become apathetic to knowledge and reason, or essentially just incapable of understanding that knowledge and reason. American society has become very complex, and with that complexity, there is a certain element of isolation that takes place. Not everyone is going to be able to operate in a complex space like that. And a feeling of isolation is a natural outflow of not being able to comprehend what's going on around you. The problem with feeling isolated in the situation is that in feeling this isolation, people are acting in ways that perpetuate that isolation. They are behaving in ways that only serve to continue their negative, isolatory feelings. If you shut yourself off to caring about how actions are taken or why they are taken. You are, without questioning, isolating yourself to a very rudimentary understanding of society. If you are one of those people who, in a sense, indirectly say they do not care about how things work, then, as I said earlier, you cannot function in a meaningful sense in the society any longer. Now, you may hold negative feelings towards the path society is taking and towards the knowledge necessary to function. However, to just disregard how things work as if it is unimportant really only further solidifies your now marginalized place in this advanced society. It's interesting how intelligence or just the perception of intelligence shapes our attitudes. If you perceive someone as being intelligent, then you are more likely to hold them in high standard. You are likely to be critical of any position they hold that you deem as anti-intellectual or just lazy or bigoted. However, if there does come a time where you understand more about a person's past and thus no longer hold them in high intellectual regard, you'll be more charitable with them. You won't necessarily pity them, but you're standards to which you hold them will fall. Now, you may think that this is a sad thing. However, having a proper understanding for people's capabilities is, I would argue, a much better position to be in than having some unrealized higher motto in your head for how someone should be acting, given their perceived level of intelligence. Yes, it is unfortunate that people's abilities can be so misrepresented. But that is not the fault of that person. It is very obvious to see why someone would be unwilling or unable to hold a position associated with high intellect when that person never developed or was never put in a position to develop the critical thinking skills necessary to hold well-developed intellectual positions. Tolerant is still not that nice. However, there is a nice view of the moon right there. The reason why corporations and politicians spend so much money on conducting issue framing studies they know that in mass the population is not that intelligent and is therefore subject to issue framing in essentially any way the corporation or politician deems beneficial. Intelligent people who have been exposed to critical thinking development, are much less susceptible to the trappings of issue framing. Issue framing is what I alluded to in my previous video on language. About implication, inference, and manipulation. I just didn't actually say the words issue framing, but I described the process well. Issue framing relies on indirect communication to convey a message. In making one statement, you are leaving the customer to abstractly think about the statement left unsaid. In hopes that they will not do so. And given the current state of our appetite for critical thinking, it's a safe bet that a general consumer will not consider the converse of a statement. Another topic of interest to talk about is the idea of where people decide to leave a conversation. When they decide that a conversation has reached its endpoint. Now, I have a viewer who I have good conversations with. We talk somewhat deeply about things, and it's interesting. We disagree on some things, other things we are in full agreement on. Now, this viewer has a similar life circumstance to my own, in that this viewer has cerebral palsy. And I recently made a video which led to some comments, and those comments led to the thought of when a conversation has reached its appropriate end. Now, the nature of these comments were relating to people's perception of people with cerebral palsy, relating to their intellectual ability. I then made the comment that not only does slow processing speed of cerebral palsy affect people's perception of your intellectual abilities, but that slow processing speed can also shut the doors of your life. If your processing speed is impacted significantly enough or diminished enough, then no matter how smart you are, you will struggle to get a job, and you probably won't get one or keep one. And as a result, everything that flows post-college for normal people will not take place for you, and that will lead to depression, which is unresolvable. Now, I have made a similar argument in previous videos. I thought that this comment would generate further discussion. However, it did not. And it's interesting to be in a position where you wish to ask more questions of people, But you know that in doing so, they might be placed in an uncomfortable position. Now, in this situation, I would like to ask this person the true nature of their disability. Is their disability such that it is severe enough that they have suffered the same fate as my own, where they struggle to get employment, and as a result have struggled with everything that flows from that? Or is that person's disability not as severe, and as a result cannot relate to the ideas expressed in my comment? You can see how asking such a question would be very beneficial and better my understanding. It would, without a doubt, change my outlook on that person. Not positively or negatively, I would just have a better appreciation for their mindset. One of the major issues in knowledge generation is the inability to ask what you may deem as inappropriate questions. Society would be better off if inappropriate questions were asked of people. Because creative answers follow from inappropriate questions. This society has so sensitized itself from anything inappropriate. If you take, for example, just Tinder bios, all the Tinder bios now are so absolutely stupid. They used to be more sexual in nature, and now they're totally scrubbed of that. And there are sociological consequences to this, without question. I think one of the important things we can strive to do is maybe get some of the inappropriateness back into our society. Inappropriateness has a place in the diversity of a culture and of a society. To rip that away is to create a sterilized environment that is absent of creativity and literally could lead to a more sterilized society, or at least one that is less sexually healthy. And as a result, will suffer the consequences that outflow from that. Knowledge generation is hard enough. We shouldn't be bogged down by the prospect of being shunned for asking what others perceive to be inappropriate questions, or having ideas of overt sexual expression. Another thing I could talk about briefly, which I talked about in previous videos, is the idea of evil and the role intentionality plays in being evil. Now, in my view, somebody like a low-level pawn who was used in a scheme by someone else cannot be evil because they lack true, comprehensive intentionality with their actions. A pawn can be a bad person. They can be a murderous person. However, if you engage in murder on behalf of somebody else, or you engage in a crime on behalf of somebody else, you yourself are not evil. Because in my view, you lack the comprehensive planning that I believe fully encompasses something that is evil. In this case, the mastermind of the criminal act is the person who is evil. Even if that person has not engaged in things like murder themselves. The mastermind has engaged in the thought process necessary to say that they have a complete conception for the intentionality of their actions. If somebody is acting as a low-level pawn and they do something bad, they should without a doubt be held accountable. Although I do not believe they can be held to the same level of account as the person above them who has every intention of using that person, of manipulating that person to carry out actions that they are too cowardly to carry out themselves. If you pay attention to my YouTube postings, you'll note that this thought stems from the way I view Donald Trump and how he uses and abuses his stupid followers. His followers, by and large, are not evil, because whatever intentions they do act on are low-level intentions. However, Donald Trump acts on intentions that are of much greater scale and are of much greater significance and cause much damage to the greater structuring of government and to the well-being of the population as a whole. And it is now very cold and getting dark. So that will be the end. I will leave you with Shot of the Moon.